Hi, good evening. Hello. Firstly, what did you think of Rob Crouch? Rob, I salute you.
And I salute you.
Pubs. Pubs were much more than, as you were saying, just... Are you with me? Hello? Yeah. Much more than just a drinking outlet. It really was his home in many ways. He loved pubs, and he loved the people that he met in pubs. Pubs were very important, not only just for study, but he was much happier with real, as someone heckled earlier up there, but with, as he saw it, as real people. His friends weren't movie stars. They weren't involved in film and entertainment. They were the road digs. They were people who were electricians and painters, just real people. But it was very important to him, and the beer every now and then.
Yeah, and I think we wanted to turn the theatre into a pub, basically, and make it feel like, I mean, one of the first principles for deciding that we wanted to do this show, Mike and I wanted to give the audience the experience of being in the presence of one of these sort of extreme characters, the like of which we don't really see today. And the pub was central to that. That was our sort of, our first idea was really to present this sequence of pubs, all of which are in this one pub. And there's a sort of bitter irony in the fact that the place that he died was called The Pub in Valletta in Malta. It's now called Ollie's Last Bar, I think. But that to us was very fitting, and there was this sort of circularity to it that I think attracted us.
Yeah, I think people love those drinking stories. We can just dwell a little bit on the drinking stories. Do you have any favourite ones, you guys, that you've come across in your research?
I mean, are they all drinking stories, or are there kind of stories where he's sober? I mean, there's a great story about a photographer, David Steen, who took an amazing portrait of Ollie. But he still recalls in Broome Hall, this amazing kind of house that he had in down in Surrey. He still recalls Oliver literally going past on a horse through the front room and out the door, and not having a camera ready and thinking, shit, that was the defining photograph that I never got, you know. But there are just endless stories like that, and I think, you know, Robert has an amazing biography out called What Fresh Lunacy Is This? That includes so many of those stories. It's out in paperback soon. But one of the struggles was which stories to leave out, and actually the play has shortened, I think, in terms of trying to kind of make sure that the stories we include really count and really have that kind of, you know, potency and really tell the story most effectively, you know, because you could just dine out on all the great stories, really.
Yeah, I was 12 and it was summertime and I was back from school and he was going down to the pub and I said, can I come with you? So we got down to the pub. He got me a half a bitter shandy and I knocked it back and said it tasted like shampoo. So he got me a pint of their best and I drank 7 of them. And on the way home, he kept on looking at me like, should I be very proud or should I call the doctor? And I got home and he turned on a videotape of the Muhammad Ali-Frazier fight, which I saw about 300 times. And halfway through watching that, I suddenly got up and said, I don't feel very well. And then he sort of was trying to sort of give me duvets and things and covers, and all I just wanted to do was die and hug the porcelain.
Anyone have any questions? Just throw it open.
For Mark, how does it feel when you're watching Rob performing your dad, basically? How does it feel?
The first time I saw it, and I saw it the first time about 2.5 years ago, it was quite odd. It's quite strange to book up surreptitiously, that's what I thought, to go along to a show and incognito watch someone playing your father. It was odd, and I've got a little bit used to it. But then my life was always odd. I grew up very odd. I thought everyone's dad was on telly when I was that high. But then it didn't take long to realise that something was quite different. But it was a very strange upbringing, as you can imagine, not the normal upbringing.
Just for the record, it was absolutely terrifying when Mark first turned up for the performance. It was in a small theatre in South London, Broccoli Jack, lovely theatre, but quite small and intimate, and we knew Mark was coming, he sent us an email to say he was coming along. But, I mean, for Rob, that must have been really difficult, because the play was in its early stages, and to see Mark, obviously, looks a lot like his dad, sat at the back, kind of, you know, judging, was terrifying, but fortunately, he loved it.
Yeah, I think that, and also we had no idea what Mark was like, really, and obviously you can all see for yourselves that he is a gentleman, but we thought he might have torn the place up and just like, how fucking dare you, you Essex wanker.
How do you think a father, or what would have been the first film, or what would have been the film that your father would have wanted to make?
Off the top of my head, I don't know. I think that there were probably some regrets in not taking The Sting. I think allegedly he was offered that. Again, Robert here would know more. There were other films that perhaps he should have taken. He should have gone to America earlier, where he would have been given greater opportunities. But he felt very strongly about being in England and the Mr. England stuff, and not wanting to leave, and trying to support the British film industry. Sadly, it was on its knees, and sadly, in the end, he did leave, just purely because tax became so burdensome.
I think my sort of impression almost was that he was this sort of almost accidental pioneer, because he was the first full frontal male nude, he was the first person to use the F word, he was the first person in an X certificate that was on general release, mainstream X certificate. And I sort of think that it was just the people that he hung out with. I think that one of the things that I felt quite strongly about when we were making this was also about sort of reclaiming the 70s a little bit, because it tends to be sort of thought of as this sort of joke decade, and everybody thinks, oh, you know, Saturday Night Fever and white suits and Roger Moore in a safari suit. But the greatness of British filmmaking in the 70s, and of people like Winner and Ken Russell at that time, I think was extraordinary. And he was lucky enough to be in with those people, basically. And I think that's why he became a pioneer. But I'm not sure that he felt particularly strongly about wanting to do that.
No, I think there were just missed opportunities. I think there were opportunities that he would have got if he had moved. And he'd kept his act a little cleaner. But he'd got to a stage in the 70s, mid-70s, where he was a little bored of it. And when he got bored, obviously the films weren't coming in as frequently, so he went to Playmore. And when he went to Playmore, that gave the press more opportunity to write stories about him, which he thought was good, because no publicity is bad publicity. But really, I suppose, at the end of the day, when producers are frightened away, that's bad publicity. So things started to dry up for him, so it became even more naughty.
Does anyone, any other questions? Gentleman here, front. Alan Bates.
I was going to ask Mark, especially, you know, your father was so incredible in so many ways, and do you ever get, I guess it's kind of delicate, but do you ever get bored of being asked questions like, oh, tell us another kind of booze story, when in fact he had, I'm sure, so many incredible stories that were about him and his talent and everything else?
He was remarkably talented, and it's sad, but it's the reality that newspapers and publicity tends to be about notoriety. There were times when he was wandering around his garden watering the plants, but that's not newsworthy. That didn't sell newspapers. I don't tend to tell stories, if I'm out having a beer, about did you hear this or did you hear that. It's not my style. But there are many, many other facets to him, which to me were much more important. And primarily, he was my father first, and I loved him. Secondarily, he just had a very different job.
I love the stories, sometimes the anecdotes where he's not in the pub and he just is a great prankster. So there's like great stories of the way he has practical jokes with children. You know, he loved kids, would have made an amazing grandfather by all accounts, you know, and I think at Broome Hall he had this incredible searchlight. So all you kids would just kind of pull out of bed, and it was like a Second World War searchlight he just had mounted on his on his window, you know. And so they all had to scramble and play war games, you know. He would head down to the woods and say to the kids that he was with, you know, there's a dragon in the woods, you know, there's a dragon in the woods. And there'd be a kind of, the head gardener, Dobber, would be in the woods and waiting with a kind of really flammable material that he then set alight. And the kids would be like, you know, they'd be dining out in the playground for months on, you know, we saw a dragon in Oliver Reed's garden. And those are the stories I adore, you know.
There's another lovely story that I like, it's the sensitive side of Oliver. One of my favourite Oliver films is Hannibal Brooks, where he's the escaped POW with the elephant. And there were two elephants in the film. And Jackie told me this, actually. And one of them despised Oliver and tried to push him off the mountainside when they were filming. The other one absolutely adored him. And at the end of the film, when the elephant had to leave, go back to Germany, and the handler of the elephant, the elephant was actually crying.
I mean,
I just think it's like...
we were going to do that.
But I think one elephant saw the dark side of Oliver, and the other elephant saw the sensitive side, you know? Yeah.
Mike was
it's a discerning one.
I mean, actually, I think that's... I would quite like to ask if you think... Because, you know, Mark obviously saying, oh, well, you know, newspapers are sold on notoriety, and to a certain extent so are plays. And I don't know whether you perhaps felt we were complicit in that.
It goes back to the drinking. I'm sure
you say that he drank 100 pints in 24 hours, but his autobiography, Read All About Me, it says 124. What was the real total?
Well, he didn't write his autobiography, did he? It was ghostwritten for him. He was otherwise indisposed at the time.
I mean, that was one of the first stories.
The story I was told by the guy who was actually there was actually when Ollie was in Guernsey, and it's about 100 pints during the whole day because the pubs in Guernsey stay open all day, and it was low alcohol lager. It was the lowest alcohol. Otherwise, it would have killed him. And he was off to the toilet every 10 minutes, and and the pub was filling up during the day while this was going on. That's the story I was told. Yeah.
And I think one of the things that we try and convey really is the sense of the sort of myth making, and I think he was complicit in the manufacturing of his own myths. And I think Read All About Me is an interesting case in point because Mike and I took that as gospel. You know, that was what our first draft of the play really was very heavily based on it. And then we met Mark, and Mark was like, "You didn't believe all that shit, did you?" and actually, the story of how Read All About Me came about is actually in itself quite interesting. Maybe
there was a fellow by the name of Fergus Cashen who was a wonderful Fleet Street hack who offered to ghost write his book, and my father got on rather well with Fergus because he back to the drink again. And they got on very well, and he said, if you want to write a book about me, then you have to come and live with me. And so he moved into a cottage next to Broom Hall and spent months there. And my father used to sort of rip up his drafts and pee on his typewriter. And it was debauchery. It was absolutely awful. But Fergus was great. But if you read that book now, and I've sort of dabbled at looking into it again, it tends to be very much of its time. It's sort of the fantastic 70s, and it's full of all the typical 70s stuff. To me, it's a bit flimsy.
I think we've got time for one more. So. Gentleman at the back in the check shirt.
Yeah, hi. My favourite picture of Oliver Reed is that famous one where he's in the pub. He's got a suit on, he's balanced, kind of like so. You know the one?
Yeah.
The horizontal handstand.
Yes. I think that's after the 100 pints. I think. More. It certainly looks like it. Yeah.
I just think that's just an incredible display of A, athleticism and B, strength.
Rob can do the same. In fact, he may demonstrate now.
That's the same thing. Let me do that. Come on. I can't even do an actual handstand.
So I just wanted to do just how good a sportsman, was he to be able to do that? As I say,
He always tried to always testing his strength, wasn't he? Which I know upset you. You were very, when he used to do bench presses and on chairs and things.
Yeah, he used to do a remarkable thing with a chair with a back on it, where he used to put his hand on the back of the chair, lift his legs out and do a sort of a nigh-on handstand, and then lower himself back onto the chair, and go purple whilst he was doing it. And he was doing it when he was 50. And I was saying, you've got to stop this shit, because one day a little capillary is going to pop somewhere, and that'll be the end of you. But he just couldn't stop. That's how he was. But he was remarkably strong. I was about 13 before he stopped picking me up by one hand and lifting me above his head. And I was probably then 12 stone. So, he was remarkable. And he was usually very drunk when he was doing it. And there was a stone floor below me, and I'm sort of 6.5, 7 foot up looking at this stone floor. But he was remarkably strong. Physically, absolutely amazing.
That's cool. I think that's all we're out of time.
That's it, guys. Thanks very much for coming.